Hi there, welcome to the Firestarters video series. My name is Steve Scheier. I've worked in cannabis since 2018. I talk and write about power and leadership, and I offer leaders in cannabis leadership guidance and curated advisory boards. I'm also starting in May a cannabis CEO council, so if you're interested in that, please let me know. I'm also the co-author of Power Up, Essential Tools for Cannabis Leaders, which is available on Amazon. Our guest today on Firestarters is Jon Paul. I'm really excited to have Jon on the show with me today. He is the Chief Financial Officer of Australis Capital in, as you can see, lovely Las Vegas, Nevada. So, Jon, thank you very much for being on the show, and for all of your work and service in the cannabis industry. It's really a great pleasure to have you on today.
Well, it's an incredible industry. Could never imagine what it's like to come in here, and I share a lot of the same passion that you indicate. So,
absolutely. So, Jon, I always ask people, give me a couple of words on how you would describe the state of the cannabis market in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, I think what's just so unique about the cannabis market, it's one word I use to describe it is very dynamic. Things are changing very rapidly. Dynamic, I would say. Another is kind of unpredictable. It's very hard to tell what's coming on board, and but it's growing extremely rapidly, and there's a lot of headwinds that are going to point to extraordinary growth in the future. So we need more strong leaders to come into the industry, and incredible opportunity.
So, Jon, tell us about your journey in cannabis. How you're the only member that I'm aware of the Harvard Business School that has actually been on the show, which I'm grateful that you have been and that you are. But tell us about your journey in cannabis.
Well, I'd like to say I was very smart and it was a very strategic move, and that would be a total lie. In reality, I backed into it. My career has been spent with helping entrepreneurs catch the next wave in their hypergrowth industries, and happened to get a call from someone in Chicago. And he said he had a brother-in-law in San Mateo in Silicon Valley. He had a cannabis firm that he needed to get public very quickly or he was going to lose half his equity. So I said, timing was great. Always wanted to do something in Silicon Valley. I've been involved in IPOs before, so dove right in and thought, well, how hard could the cannabis industry be?
How hard could it be, really? So what have been the challenge, as a chief financial officer, as somebody who understands companies and how they work, what are some of the major issues and challenges you see cannabis companies having to wrestle with?
Well, as I was flying out to the airport the next day, I called a friend in Chicago who was involved in fundraising in the industry and asked him, what should I know? And he mentioned about taxes. So I like to joke and say, I thought 280E was a highway. I had no idea about the tax burden. It's just incredibly onerous that cannabis firms are taxed on their gross margins. And they are, many companies and other industries, very successful, could not survive under the taxation in our industry. So that puts a huge burden on our cash flow. So you could be a company making very positive operating income, let's say 10% of sales, and yet you'd be losing money on a net income basis because your taxes would be higher.
Yeah.
So, that's one thing. The banking is difficult there. Did not realize. That's another area. There are resources. There are, in any particular state, there might be a select number of state charter banks or credit unions that will do banking for you, or there are some fintech companies. So there are workarounds, but that's a challenge. You have all the cash to handle. Another thing I like to joke about is one day early on, the CEO asked me what our cash balance was, and being a good CFO, cash is very near and dear to my heart. So I gave him the total cash balance, and then he kind of looked at the cash balance, the green stuff. You also have the problem is, let's say, not only collecting the cash, but then how do you get rid of it? We had a point where our balances had gone up to $3 million. So we could talk more about that. And then another thing is just a lot of suppliers and services that you're typically used to. Many insurance underwriters will not get involved in the cannabis industry.
Right.
Many software firms. So you may come in as CFO and you have your favorite financial package, and then you find out they don't serve the cannabis industry, or their payroll provider will not serve it. So
right.
It's so there's a lot of challenges you have to deal with in this particular industry as a CFO that make it very unique.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you tell us about the focus of Australis Capital?
So then with that, the company in California was Plus Products, and they were an edibles company. Got them public, helped them grow, and then left after a couple of years. They were in a good position, and then the opportunity to come join Australis in Las Vegas became available. Australis is a spinoff of Aurora. So when Aurora up in Canada went public in the U.S., they were not companies that are public in the U.S. are not allowed to have U.S. plant touching assets. So they had to spin off some of their U.S. assets. So they created Australis, and then Australis. So by the time I came on board, Australis had been around for a few years, and prior management had made a number of investments, were heavy fintech oriented, and shareholders weren't satisfied. So they voted out the board, voted out the management, and a new board, new management came in place, which I was part of. And so we've been making a number of changes with Australis, particularly moving it away from fintech, moving away from being a heavy investment focus to investing in our own operation. And so we're a big believer in the U.S. cannabis market. And so I like to say we're a multi-state operator in the making, trying to put different pieces together. We're also unique because we acquired a consulting company up in Toronto that does both horticultural and cannabis greenhouse consulting. So that makes us a little bit unique among cannabis operators.
Very unique. Why did you take that step?
Well, I think one, because, there's a relationship there. Our CEO, Terry Booth, who came along with the acquisition, he was a major shareholder in that. And part of his premise was, because he had been up in Canada, and up in Canada, it was sort of a race. Everybody built up the big infrastructure. And then there's a classic oversupply. And then you have kind of that painful downscaling. And so he said, well, I'm not going to do that again, make these huge investment in cultivation assets that just don't pay off. So part of the reason for the acquisition with Alps is to have access to canopy through some of Alps customers.
Okay. Got it. So it's been my experience, I used to be a VP of HR, and I've hired chief financial officers, and I think they're incredibly important. Not just because they can tell you where the cash is, but because they have a strategic understanding of the business, or the good ones certainly do. So, there are a lot of people who are listening to the show who may not really be aware of the value that a CFO can bring to an enterprise. So, for all of the sort of new CEOs that are out there, what's the value of a CFO? I certainly know, but explain what are the top 2 or 3 things that a CFO can do for you.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's a big step, let's say, from going from a controller to being a CFO. And certainly, I think one is, you talk about with the strategy and kind of understanding the bigger picture. And that's so important in the cannabis world. We like to joke and say we're the un-United States of America. It's more like 50 different countries with all the different regulation and things. But at the same time, I mean, there's such a rich array of opportunities. Unfortunately, you can't do them all. So you have to. So one thing a CFO can do is to help kind of identify, strategize, and say, for a particular company, these are the best opportunity that makes the most sense for the particular strengths we have as a company. another thing I think a CFO really brings to the table from the years of experience and connection is the connection that they can bring.
Right.
And, that's something I've worked very hard on to cultivate. Because when I came out to Silicon Valley, one, I didn't know a lot of people. So I got engaged with providers to help expand my network within Silicon Valley. And to my surprise, well, they had a lot of people who were involved in the cannabis industry. And so we had cannabis affinity groups. And, through there, I've gotten to meet you and so many other, tremendous people. That's one of the great benefits of the cannabis industry. I think it is a very open environment. Very, you can't know it all. Things are changing so quickly, so you need to have that kind of pipeline of people to be able to tap into there.
Yeah.
And I think another, maybe a third thing of
please.
value of the CFO would be the capital markets and knowing about timing, and that could be so important in the cannabis industry. And I like to say, looking back, there are probably some things I would have done a little bit differently, but there are definitely some big ebbs and flows in the capital markets. And I'd say, we've been in kind of a bear market in the cannabis industry in the U.S. for the past 15 years. 15 months, and feels like 15 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like
every
15
month feels like a year in this industry. But so, knowing very much, the timing of the capital market, because it's tough. I mean, the big MSOs are able to kind of go out and raise capital, and they're raising massive amounts of debt, 100 million plus, but smaller firms do not have that kind of access. The public markets are pretty shut. So if you haven't lined up enough capital ahead of time, you could be in a very difficult position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there a segment of the market that you're particularly excited about right now?
Well, I think that's a great question. You can slice it a number of different ways. One can be the particular states. I think there's great opportunities in a number of states that are coming on board. Certainly, New York going to be very transformational with the size of New York, and you have the other things in the metro area, New Jersey, elsewhere. But then even things kind of spring up very quickly you don't anticipate, such as New Mexico, which is opening it up for recreational, and they're doing it in a very open fashion. I think Florida is a huge untapped market right now. Just a small number of very super licenses, medically oriented, kind of very, encourage vertical integration. But I think given the population dynamics there,
right,
huge uptick that can come there once things change from legislation or regulatory environment, and that's so key that you kind of be wired into those aspects, that you have good advisors,
right,
who help you out there.
Right. What do you think about Oklahoma? Have you been have any dealings? I've interviewed several people in Oklahoma. That state seems to be on fire.
Well, it's on fire, certainly. I mean, what a huge success story from the growth of cannabis. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's a very profitable place to be. And I mean, I think it's going to be, it's kind of very oversaturated when the, it's great to see the medical benefit that doing for people there. But, we kind of looked at it and we had some interest there. We say, this is just going to be a tough environment to monetize. And that is a challenge for the cannabis industry. We see in a number of other states, that it plays out. State becomes legal recreationally, more companies jump in, and then after a few years, there's oversupply, and there's that painful contraction, such as we see having take place in California.
Right. Well, Jon, as we wrap up here a little bit, there are a couple other things to talk about. Number one, as you know, I write about power. I write about leadership. I work with people to help them be better leaders in the space. I think the space needs more leadership. So what do you think is, from a leadership perspective, what are the tips that you have, or not the tips so much, but what are the attributes you look for in a successful cannabis leader?
Yeah, part is, well, yeah, I think you look at one from a company perspective and two from a leadership perspective. And I
Hmm.
think, it's an interesting dynamics taking place. On the one hand, you have the state of California. No, it's been a very legacy market, very heavily brand dominated.
Hmm.
So, tough market. So the big multi-state operators have not necessarily come in. But then you see other states where the big multi-state operators dominate, and um, so much. It'll be interesting to see how the power kind of plays out. Where will this settle? And then plus two in this industry, there's a lot of power within the state government or even within the local communities.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think in terms of a leader, I mean, I think there you need a blend of kind of strategic and execution.
Hmm.
You need to be kind of very strategic in terms of picking your spots and where you go after, but you also have to execute very well. And it's particularly challenging industry because we have, I like to say, Heinz doesn't necessarily grow their own tomatoes, Levi Strauss doesn't grow their own cotton. And yet in
Right.
the cannabis industry, some of the structure has encouraged vertical integration
Hmm.
from growing the plant
Hmm.
to running a successful dispensary operation.
Right.
Hugely different skill set.
Yeah.
So, um, so I mean, I think the ability to motivate and attract good people
Yeah.
and
Very important.
be able to, I think, be able to relate to people across a wide spectrum. Because
Hmm.
you got very different folks there within the different areas of the company. So I think I think the CEO role is very challenging, very unique within the cannabis industry. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what are the companies that Australis is looking to invest in? What sort of segments are you? I wanted to ask this earlier and I forgot. Are there particular segments you're interested in?
so we pivoted instead of making minority investments in companies. We have pivoted to where we pretty much sold off all those investments, and that doesn't mean that they're not terrific companies, but
Right.
instead we're choosing to say we want to put our money behind our own particular operation. We acquired, I mean, we were based in Las Vegas, but we also had acquired a Green Therapeutics,
Hmm.
which are an indoor grow extraction product company here in Las Vegas, led by Duke Fu. Great background, and we want to leverage that particular expertise. We think there's opportunity for more growth within Nevada. Apply that. We're applying that into California. We feel you need to have a presence there, and we acquired a beverage company, and we're taking Duke brands, expanding them into California. Also looking at other select opportunities in California, and
Hmm.
then there's number of other. We're looking at different states and trying to look at sort of unique opportunities within different states. I mean, one of the things, in my background, I was CFO for a generic pharmaceutical manufacturer in the early days of generic pharmaceuticals. And
Yeah.
that was perhaps a very unique industry because you could look at the roadmap and say, well, in this year, these products are coming off patent, et cetera. So everybody's kind of looking at the same map. It's going to happen at the same time. So you get kind of picking, and we try to look at it and say, how can we see it differently than other people are seeing? So we didn't necessarily go after the thing product that everybody was going after. We found either different dosage types or um, different types of expirations on patent. So
Hmm.
we approached it very differently.
Right. Exactly. Well, so Jon, in wrapping up here, tell people how they can reach you if
Sure.
they want to reach you.
Yeah. So my email at Australis and our we Australis Capital doesn't necessarily sound a cool name for a cannabis brand. So we are kind of our operating DBA is Audacious.
Audacious. Okay.
So my email is Jon, Jon, at audacious.net. So that'd be the best place to reach me.
Well, you have been audacious today, and we're really grateful for your time today. And you're really a wonderful person to have on the show because you have so much so much experience, and you're feeling very dynamic and very excited about this new space. So I thank you very much for being on the show today and sharing your wisdom with people. Oh, there's one more thing. You were working on a book, right?
Yeah, I was doing a book, and then it was going to be because.
But it was an interesting idea. Tell us about
it. Was kind of like and I called it growing like a weed, and part of it came because I did a presentation to our Northern California cannabis affinity group, and I talked about the crazy life of a cannabis CFO, and then I posted it on LinkedIn, and it just kind of blew me away. Not that I did anything so great or so, but I think it reflected interest in the topic, and I got over 50,000 views. So I said, this may be a message here. There's a lot of interest in this topic, and so the book, it would be called "Growing Like a Weed," and it's kind of a fictional story, kind of like a Patrick Lenciani type of thing, but walking through, a CEO and CFO interaction and kind of going through all the crazy things we have to deal with in our particular industry.
All right. Well, I hope that it will come out in the next bit of time, and we'll have you on the show again to talk about it when it does.
Very good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and again, I'm happy to. It's a fabulous industry. It's tough. It's not for the faint of heart, but if anybody's up for the challenge, consider diving in.
All right. Well, Jon, thanks so very, very much.
Thank you.